good evening. It's good evening, Africa. I think most of us are in the good evening, session of the time. Asia and Europe, and then I think it's a good afternoon, South America. Daniel and the rest, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Spring Cross-Regional Dialogue 2020, the Spring Alumni Conference 2020. The theme for this year's dialogue is responding to the global pandemic towards a sustainable and resilient future. It is organized by the Spring Alumni Chile and many participants actually from across the globe. Now it is important to note that the Spring here means spatial planning for regions in growing economies. And just to remind you that the dialogue is inspired by the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, what is called the 2030 Agenda. I mean, we are now 10 years to the 2030 Agenda, so maybe this is the right time to discuss some of these key topics that we are getting here. And for me, this is, and especially looking at the context, it is against the backdrop of the COVID-19, and that is why we are having this conference online as opposed to, meeting physically and engaging person to person, mind to mind. So now we have to meet in what we call impersonal, in an impersonal way, but we still get to engage. So the pandemic has indeed transformed the traditional way of doing things and engaging. And as you have seen that learning, and now that we are dealing with the education, learning, for example, has for a period been transferred online, what is called remote learning. And economies have basically been impacted negatively, and markets, have stagnated for some time. And for those who watched the debate the other day, Donald Trump against Biden, many issues. One of the key issues that came up was because of COVID-19, and there were issues to do with education, and our education, has been transformed because of COVID-19. And then the question was, what policies, what to do? How do you admit students? How do you admit learners to schools? In a way that you're not exposing them, but in a way that you're also not keeping them too long at home. So that was a very interesting debate for me. So just to summarize, I think that the event started yesterday with a number of topics. The Build Back Better, which concerned the difficulties and opportunities markets, public spaces, and the informal economy are currently facing. And I hope those who attended enjoyed and learned from this, the opening, discussions. And again, now we are in day 2, and day 2, there was a topic on food security strategies. I briefly attended the circular economy. It's my first time to be introduced to this, topic or discipline. And basically it's a way to combat poverty. And I had some very interesting discussions in that session. And then there was hybrid sector synergizing the healthcare system with other sectors. And now we are finally, day 2, we have the future of education, planning digital innovation in service delivery. So my name is Leo. I work with the Media Council of Kenya as a manager in partnerships and stakeholder engagement. I know the program might be stating something different. I worked for CRECO some years ago, and then I left for my studies in Germany. Came back, found a job with what we call the media regulator in Kenya. So I have a master in politics from Osnabrück, and I've also worked with for the alumni portal Deutschland as a multiplicator in Kenya for more than 4 years. You will find my profile online. So basically, before we proceed, it's basically the etiquette of switching off or muting yourself when you are not speaking, and muting yourself when you're speaking. For the sake of your data bundles, like we say in Kenya, please save them because you're going to need them until the end of the the session. And switch off your camera. Unless you're the speaker or you're moderating, and use the icons available. If you want to speak, you can raise your hand. It makes it a little bit more engaging, even though it's impersonal and we are at different locations. And also, I would like to say that you feel free to post your comment on the chat. Any question, any comment that you have in mind, please give it to us, and we are going to read it out. We are going to respond to you. So the session is going to take the format of the presentation from the keynote speaker. And then we are going to be followed by a short plenary discussion on, the issues that are going to come out of that presentation. And after that, we are going to break away into group discussions. There will be 3 groups of 4 people each, hoping that we're going to have 12 people by the end, by the end of the presentation. And then that will be followed by presentations and further plenary, and then conclusion. I think that should not take us more than an hour. And therefore, now to introduce the keynote speaker today, we have Dr. Daniel Vincente, Assistant Professor of the Institute of Electricity and Electronics at Austro University of Chile, based in Valdivia. He received his Bachelor of Science in Electroscience in 2003, a diploma in Electro Engineering in 2004, and his doctoral in 2018, all of them from University of Chile. And then in 2004 to 2006, he was a research associate and a volunteer consultant at the Harvard Smithsonian Center, where working at the astrophysics submillimeter receiver lab in the USA. So he joined Austro University in 2007, and in 2009, he was one of the founders of the engineering and technical innovation company, Triangulo Austro Limited. I hope I got that one correctly. His current research interests are in robotics and astro engineering. He is a member of the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers and several electro and electronic technical societies, including the Education Society, the Computational Intelligence Society, the Society on Social Implications of Technology, the Systems, Man, and Cybernetics Society, as well as the IEE Special Interest Group in Humanitarian Technology. He's also the technical advisor of Ciudad Limpia, a smart city project on intelligent information system for residential waste collection in the city of Valdivia. So as you can see, Dr. Daniel is a very well exposed and learned and a very scientific, oriented person. So Daniel, it is your turn now to take us through your presentation to impress us and to make us, think. You're most welcome. Yes.
Thank you very much, Leo. Hello, everyone, and thank you also the organizers, the Spring Alumni organizers, for all their hard work and for inviting me to share these views and ideas in this event with all of you. So let me see. Please let me know if you can see the main slide of the presentation.
Yes, I can.
Yes, I can. Okay. The video panel also here. Okay, so the presentation will have 3 parts: an introduction, then something about the coronavirus, and then some things we can do to tackle all the problems we have. So the presentation has some data and some facts, but most of the statements are personal views or experiences, so don't take them as like certain truth or anything like that. The idea is to motivate the further discussion afterward, after the presentation and the workshop activities. Okay, so this is about SDG 4, quality education. Some of you may be very familiar with it. I was not, so I had to study and learn about it. So you can check the specifics in the websites or other documentation. But to briefly summarize the SDG 4, it has several targets. The general idea is to ensure universal access to equitable and quality education at pre-primary, primary, secondary, tertiary, vocational, and technological education. Also, there's a focus in eliminating gender disparities as well as other disparities, like people in vulnerable situations, indigenous people, persons with disabilities, etc. The aim is that everyone can develop relevant and effective knowledge and skills, particularly aligned with sustainable development, of course. And the means of implementation targets are mostly related to infrastructure, economic resources. It focuses on scholarships and the qualification of teachers. So I was also I took this opportunity to check how was Chile, the country where I live, doing with respect to SDG 4. But before that, let's see what has happened with SDG 4 globally. So if you have been following the progress of SDGs, SDG 4 was not doing very well, even without considering the effects of the pandemic. And the coronavirus situation has hit this SDG really, really hard. So things don't look very bright right now, although this might be, as I will comment on by the end of the presentation, this might be an opportunity to find ways to improve that. So you can check the report on the UN website. You can find these infographics and also more details on the problems that are affecting the progress of SDG 4 right now. And of course, the other SDGs as well. So I will start talking about Chile, but I will make a small parenthesis before starting about that, because I want to share with you, some of you may already know this, but in Chile, we are going to vote tomorrow whether we want a new constitution or not. This might well be the most important voting process so far in the history of our country. That's what I think. And just before the pandemic, as it was happening in other places around the world, our current social, political, and economical system started to collapse. It was already broken from before, but it doesn't resist any more patching. So we need to fix it from the ground up. And one of the key areas that was crumbling down was education, the educational system, the educational model. So let's hope tomorrow we opt for a new constitution, which would allow us to establish the basis for a more sustainable, just, equitable, and high quality educational model in Chile. And as a little homage for them, I want to mention 3 persons, which I was very lucky to meet in person, who are not with us anymore and whose life work were lighthouses, among many others, that led to tomorrow's democratic act in Chile. So first, I will mention Professor Theo Kausel, who just passed away a few days ago, Professor Max Neef, who left us last year, and a professor of mine at Universidad de Chile, Professor Renato Spos, who also passed away last year. If you have the opportunity, please check their works. They are very valuable in related to development and society, how to build a better society. So let's resume with the progress of Chile with regards to SDG 4. So I was basically using one source of information. That's the government, the official source, which is presented in an official website. You have the links there. And also last year, Chile submitted to the UN their second voluntary report. So I have numbers for some of the indicators. I don't want to focus on the values of the numbers. They are not great. They are just average for target 4.1. But I would like to emphasize that I found many inconsistencies in the way that the indicators were measured and in the measurements themselves. So also for other indicators, there was no information available. For others, there's a lot of detail. There were very basic inconsistencies, like here. If you see the target 4.3, access to technological, vocational, and tertiary education. So the website, the official website, says that the baseline is less than 20%, measured in 2015, and then the last year report showed that the measurement in 2015 is a completely different value. So as I said, I know there are difficulties in measuring this, and even in time, apparently the way that or the methodology to measure might have changed. We have seen that also probably across the world in the way that people were measuring the cases of COVID. Yeah, we saw a lot of changes in methodologies, the way of counting the people that were affected, the people who died. So this also affects the measurements in the progress of the SDG reports. And all with this slide, basically related to the means of implementation, I also would like to emphasize that the policies of governments have a huge impact on the progress related to the SDGs. In part, I want to share with you the particular example of policies related to the mean of implementation 4.B, which was increased scholarships. And our current government is going just the opposite way. Last year, they suspended the scholarship for foreigners studying in Chile, and also scholarships for master's programs for Chilean residents. And this year, they suspended the scholarships for doctoral programs available for Chilean residents also. So these policies are obviously completely against the progress in this particular target. So I hope we can revert that next year. The explanation is that we don't have enough resources for that, but I don't know. I think there were other budget items that could have been reduced instead of this one. So what is it about in your own context? So are there well-established baselines? Are the measurement consistent? The policies are helping to reach the goals, etc. So we will leave this for the discussion afterwards. And then it appeared the coronavirus. So as with any critical or emergency situation, the first thing is that we were shocked. So, and what happened? In many places, we underestimated the situation. Maybe we thought it would be controlled as the previous viral outbreaks of the last decade, but it wasn't. And some of us entered like a state of denial. And I mean, not just people, but also authorities and institutions. And then those who were actually able to overcome this denial state, some people still haven't, we realized that we were completely unprepared for this, at least in many aspects, but particularly with respect to education. So how did we react? For some reason that I still fail to comprehend, in many places, apparently we try to keep our normal life as if there was no crisis. And we have no plans, basically. Currently, the only plan is to wait for the vaccines, and let's hope they are here soon and they work. So we have been reactive to the evolution of the situation. We have not been able to preemptively prepare action plans at the different terms, short, medium, or long terms. we are, in particularly in education, the response was familiar, but not always very convincing method. So this is remote education. There's a lot of discussion about the effectiveness of remote education. It was before the pandemic, and of course during this time there's still this discussion. But there was a fundamental issue here, is that we took remote education, but we didn't adapt ourselves. This was the first way we do it. We didn't adapt ourselves to the remote education process, but we tried it to adapt to our normal teaching. Again, this is like the first thing I mentioned. We try to keep doing the same. So there are many problems. One big problem when we speak of remote education in particular is that we might be forgetting that one of the means of implementation of SDG 4, and there are big reasons behind that, is that it's supposed to provide, we are supposed to provide a safe environment for learning. So, and this is a very deep, it has very deep consequences. So many students actually receive their meals at educational institutions, schools, universities, etc. Also, the environment is a way to disconnect from your personal problems, so you can be more effective in the learning and the teaching. Now that we are working at home, we have to share spaces, share resources. The resources are limited. Computer space, paper, rooms, etc. And we have lost connection with a tangible society. So far we have been dealing with this duality of the virtual communities and the real communities that we interact with personally. And now we lost that, and we only have the virtual society that we can connect with through internet or other methods. So also, what happened? Actually, I think there were we have tools to carry out remote education properly. Some countries or institutions with big resources, they had even deployed proper infrastructure for remote education, and it was working. But most of us didn't know how to use them efficiently. Trying to do the same that we do without remote education, with remote education over internet might not be the most effective or most efficient way in terms of learning. So we have to think more about this. There are other problems. A big issue has been the children at home, the parents teaching their children. Parents are not prepared in most cases to teach their children. Even families where the parents are teachers, usually, at least some cases I know, even they cannot facilitate their own children learning in the same way they do with their own students. So it's difficult, this teaching and learning at home. And this does not yet even include the situation of the time that you need to dedicate to teaching the students, and the time you need to do other things, domestic and jobs, and etc. In terms of resources, there's also a very big problem. So with logistics and supply chains affected by the pandemic, there has been an even higher impact of the inequalities in resource distributions among regions in the world. So we have seen then that globally or at national level, the inequalities in the distribution of economic and physical resources have made very difficult to keep the system going, not only in terms of education, but the whole system, everything, health, work, food supply, etc. well, as I mentioned before, so we lost this connection to a tangible society. So what happens, and it's a big issue now, the emotional effect of the isolation in the pandemic case. So our learning environment is also a small manageable society in which we are main actors, and now we don't have that. The now the learning process, this remote education process, does not only have to take care of learning, but it also have to take care of providing emotional support. And the problem is that everyone is being affected, not only students, but also teachers and other administrative and support staff. And the last question is, how can we ensure effective learning with the multiple distractions we have now around us, the health and economic uncertainty, domestic responsibilities, etc. So any other problems or effects that you have experienced or observed, we can share afterward also. So take note for the discussion. Could we have done something differently? This is very personal thoughts. I think we should have accepted the crisis and embraced the challenge as it is. We should also have accepted that we will not be able to provide the same learning experience. So therefore the students will not be able to learn what was planned for this year. But it's not lost. Some people think that what we are not doing this year is lost forever. It's not. It will just take longer. We will just have to be patient. I think we should have stopped trying to keep with our normal way of doing things. We are in a crisis. It's an emergency situation, and we should have planned for action in multiple scenarios, and then resume activities according to those plans. At least in Chile, we are just starting to have plans, but they are still reactive plans. We don't plan in different scenarios. We are just, again, we are just aiming at the coming of the vaccine. If we have the vaccine next year, then everything will be fine. If not, we don't know. We don't know what will happen. I think it's not a big mistake. It's a small mistake, but I think that many people have tried to solve every COVID problem with using internet, and it's not the way it is. And particularly in education, remote education is not a synonym for education over internet. Internet is great, and we can use it as a backbone for providing services, but it's not the only way to do it. I will mention some examples later. I hope it didn't happen everywhere, but at least I think in many places we forgot what we mentioned earlier, that schools and universities are not just places to learn content or develop competences. It's the place where we live the education. And unfortunately, it's not possible to transfer this experience as a whole to remote education. So we need to provide as much as experience as possible, but also we should plan on how to revert the effects of not having this complete experience, but after the crisis. In summary, I think we should have just slowed the pace a little bit and have a deep breath and then try to look farther to the horizon and walk in the right path. Maybe you have other ideas of things that can be done, could have been done differently. So please also share those with us later. So a particular chapter about the use of technology. So I said internet is not the solution for all, but I will focus now on digital technologies that can help in achieving or progressing in SDG 4, and particularly tackling some problems with the pandemic. Particularly, I'm an advocate of the use of free and open source technologies. I strongly believe that they are key to sustainable development. Apparently, so does the United Nations. So they published in 2012 this great book by UN University Press. It's a collection of case studies, and you can access it. It's open access and free from the UN website. And okay, so many of you have heard at least of free and open source software and technologies, and you probably have heard recently, because it's very trendy, about open data and open tools and many open things. And open is great, but it's not enough. It has to be also free. And freedom grants allow us to use, understand, and share knowledge, including art, software, hardware designs, and any other works that you can imagine if they are licensed in a free and open manner. It is an horizontal development model. There are no barriers for entrance. Everyone can join the open source, the free and open source movement at any time. You just need to be willing to develop your own skills. It allows or it promotes the engagement of communities, both at our local and global level. I have a very nice experience that I would like to share with you. So this year, I found an online circuit simulator, open source, that I used to replace the laboratory activities for my students. This project was started by a highly motivated group of students in India, and they have been able to get support from Google's Season of Code and Season of Docs program. And I was a user of the system, but now I got involved in the community, in the project community, under the Google Season of Documentation program, and I am helping them to improve their interactive learning materials that they deploy together with the simulator. So as you can see, this model, this free open source model, provides a symbiotic environment where everyone can help with what they can do best, and everyone benefits from that. In general, free and open source technologies have a big concern regarding privacy. If privacy is a key issue, and it is a key issue in education and in health and other situations. In general, free and open source software respect privacy is usually the main goal. And if for some reason there is a technology, a free and open source technology that is not providing privacy mechanisms, you can modify it in such a way so you can be safe with using the tools. You can audit the tools easily, etc. And the last point is a very interesting situation that happened regarding the pandemic crisis. So in many places, educational places, they noticed that their proprietary licenses didn't allow them to use the products outside the facilities or outside the computer networks of the educational institutions. So therefore, many teachers and institutions have switched to free and open source based technologies and tools. Some examples you can see here, many softwares for learning management systems, office suites, collaboration, social media, virtual conferencing, like LibreOffice, Nextcloud, Jitsi, Element, Diaspora. There are many options that you can choose and can be adapted to your own or customized to your own needs. And I'm pretty sure you can find near you someone with the skills that can allow you to deploy a free and open source based solution. And the last point is very interesting: hardware, open source hardware design together with 3D printing technologies or traditional manufacturing technologies that you have available locally allow anyone or any community to develop low resources devices or products or things that you can use for learning. We before the pandemic, we were doing a few we had a few projects to develop low-cost laboratory equipment for synthetic biology, and well, then the crisis came, so we couldn't finish. We haven't been able to finish the project, but it will allow to replicate this low-cost laboratory instrument for schools all over the region. So finally, I have hope, and I wanted to make reference to the phoenix, the mythical bird, in the sense that no matter how affected we have been by the pandemic, we should learn from this experience and work for a better education. I have hope in the children today. They have had a rough experience. Their traditional curriculum learning might have been affected, but they have developed the skills, new skills, and have learned to use tools that can help them both in normal situations and future crisis situations. We should have alternative and redundant systems, particularly in education, like a backup systems, they should be ready for emergency. It's costly. I know that. We as engineer, I'm an engineer, we always include these systems in our designs. And sometimes we get really mad when these systems are stripped away because there are cost constraints. They should not be removed. These safety things is like having a fire ladder in a building or any other safety thing. It's not negotiable. You need to have these backup systems in order to become resilient. So also, I mentioned before that there are other things besides internet, other technologies. So how did we communicate before internet? So we used the post, the normal post. We used TV. We had TV and radio broadcast station. They are cheap. They are ubiquitous. They can reach remote places. We can combine these old tech with current technology to be more effective in supplying or in delivering the contents for education. And finally, we can also, as I mentioned just before, we can rely on free and open source technologies to implement local, customized, replicable, and economically sustainable solutions for education. So if you have other ideas, please share with us, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Daniel. I'm having an echo. Okay, great. I think it's disappeared now. So I think you've summarized it very well in I think what I call 4 key sections, where you looked at what SGD4 is about, ideally, and then you've gone to the case study of Chile, and the challenges that are in Chile, and I hope the participants can relate to those challenges, because I'm very sure in most developing countries, these some of these indicators are never recorded. I mean, I can give the example of our country, Kenya, where you have what is called free primary education, but nobody cares, nobody enforces it really. It's there on paper, it's a good policy, but there are those challenges. So I think the second part was the case study, and then we've gone to the third part where you've looked at the impact of the pandemic, the coronavirus on our education and the education system globally, and at the general views and ideas that you've brought forward. I think they were very brilliant. Talking about issues to do with emotional effects of the pandemic in the learning space, and so on and so forth, and especially looking at the children. I mean, and talking about that, you look at how children are very fast in learning. Nobody, especially here in Kenya, sat down to teach kids how to use laptops or computers. But the pandemic comes, and then all of a sudden you have to go to study online, and then they have done it. It's amazing. So, and finally, I think you've provided as solutions on looking at the free open source, softwares and the SD technologies. And I like the point that they should not just be open, but they should also be free. And maybe we can pick the discussion from there and ask ourselves, is it really possible to have these softwares free? How possible is this? How do you get them? How do you make them free? Do you is it a policy issue, or is it an economy question? So maybe and I'm also as we now advance the conversation, we are now inviting the participants to now make their contribution. We are not going to to do any breakaways because we are only around 6-7 of us. And therefore, I encourage that we just exhaust everything in the plenary here. I invite you you've listened to the presentation, you've looked at it, you've heard it. What are your reactions? What are your experiences from your countries, from wherever you are? What have you seen? What is new? What has changed? Are children going back to school in your country to have the physical, engagement and learning, the normal learning process, or are they still doing it online? And is it equitable? Is everybody capable of affording that gadget, the software, so that every child can equitably, learn from home? So, Daniel, how possible is it to make this hardware free? The software, I mean, the free open sources and, the hardwares that come with them.
Yeah, this is a very important point. When basically one of the main organizations behind this, especially related to software, is the Free Software Foundation. When you check their documents, it's important to make a distinction between free in freedom and free as in cost. So free and open source technologies are not costless. They have cost, but they provide freedom, the freedom to use it, the freedom to modify it, the freedom to share the original content, and the freedom to share the modified versions. And this is something that we are used with all things. For instance, when you buy a hammer, you can use the hammer for whatever option you want. You can use it to keep your paper from flying away with the wind, or you can use it to hammer. Nobody will discuss that. But nowadays, there is discussion about that, because, for instance, you cannot use an iPhone for whatever you want, or other machineries. So coming back to the main question, so the free means basically freedom to all those things that to do all those things that I mentioned. And in terms of cost, what is interesting is that it's also low cost. It's not completely free of cost, but it can be low cost. So it will depend on policies that will also help, because if nobody is pushing to choose on this side of the technology, and there are economic perturbances in the market that will allow you to acquire proprietary solutions cheaper, because someone is hiding the costs, and that's usually the case, then it's not possible for normal people to correctly decide which should be the more efficient and optimal solution, or the most sustainable in all dimensions, economically, socially, etc. But a big point or a big issue is that when you choose proprietary solutions, you are losing some rights. You're losing the right to use it for whatever you want. You're losing the right to understand how something works. And you, of course, lose the right to share it, or to share your adapted use. And that's not only for things or for software, it's also valid for works of art, for books or content, any creation, basically.
Yeah, thank you for that. Very adequate. I mean, I was looking at, yes, I can see Anne. Please proceed.
I don't know. I'm not used to use the chat room to immediately type my questions. I'm not so good hand typer, so therefore it's better that I can speak directly.
Yes, please.
Well, Dan, thank you very much. Thank you very much that you took your time and to think about to read properly the content and the meaning behind of the CDG4. And I'm very grateful for your reflections and including your own experience in Chile, what is in some extent similar to what we have experienced here in Germany. However, there might be some differences. I would like to go back to the aspect of free and open source software. It's, in my opinion, it's highly depending in which context you are using that, either on my private computer or on my work computer. We are not allowed to put any program or the software which don't have a university license on my work computer. So here I'm excluded from programs, from technology, which might be very helpful in my daily work. And I'm not able to have the time when I'm sitting at home on my private computer to study and being not equipped with this knowledge to decide, also that maybe it's also depending on my age, is that a good software which I can use? Is that serving the expected quality, and what I need finally to do with this software? And here are my limitations. Whoever is really very familiar with this software and how they are produced, okay, they are, in my opinion, always at the safe side. However, I'm absolutely not practical in, I don't have this access to this knowledge. And here I need support, and the support I got from my university, from the IT units, which telling me, okay, these are the programs, these are software we can offer you. We have a license for that, so you can use it and even provide then tutorials, services, and etc., etc. So for me, it's the dilemma. Yes, of course, I would like to use the open source software. On the other hand, okay, I'm not very well informed about them, and in my daily work, I'm not allowed to do. So I don't know how we can get out of this dilemma.
I don't know if someone else wants to comment, but I can start. So yeah, that's a very important point. So yeah, as you mentioned, the thing is that there is a lot of support for proprietary tools, and not only that, there's a more how do you say, there is this lock-in, the vendor lock-in methodology in economics. You should probably, many of you have heard of it. So when you buy a computer or any device, it might have already in place some proprietary whatever, can be software or other hardware accessories. And once you chose that brand, then you cannot change basically. So so there's a lot of that. So when institutions, it can be educational institutions or other companies, when they invested the first time in some technological solution, they may have locked into that vendor, and that's probably the biggest issue, because now to change it costs. It costs resources, money, time, knowledge, skills. So that makes it difficult. However, I think that people are not being or how to put it, maybe let's put it in an economic perspective. So the market is not being fair in this sense, because probably you are using free and open source technologies at work also. Maybe the servers are open source technology. So why, if the servers are based on open source technology, they cannot provide other open source tools? There's something happening in the IT department. Why are they using open source technologies for some things but not for everything? And why are they not providing alternatives? Because probably you are, I guess you might be able to use Firefox browser at the office, and that's open source. That's free and open source technology. So if you have that, why can't you use LibreOffice? And it's not that they don't have licenses, because the difference with copyleft licenses is that you get the license without having to pay any royalty. That's the only difference. There's no difference between an open source license and a proprietary license in terms of licenses. So the license control what you can do or what you cannot do. For one, you have to, on top of the license, you have to pay a royalty most of the time, besides the cost of the product, because that's what happens in the proprietary world, is that you have the cost of the product, and then you also charge extra for the license to use the product. And nowadays is even different. They don't even charge you the cost of the product. They just charge you for the license, which is the case of hardware like the iPhone, where the company thinks that they are granting you a license to use an iPhone. It's not that you own an iPhone. So yeah, I think if the market was more leveled, then and the competition was even more fairer, I don't know what's the adjective for that in English, then it will be easier to make the switch. But and another thing, just the last thing. So I don't think everybody should be expected to know how to migrate from one technology to another. There should be someone else to help you to do that, as you do with the proprietary software. With proprietary software, it's not that you are an expert on using and installing that software. There's someone else who does it for you, and there should be the same situation for the other case. So in the open source, the free and open source world, there's a lot of community effort regarding that, but there's not so many established formal companies dedicated to that. But nowadays you can see many more in that area. So we have seen many more companies providing services and delivering services using free and open source technologies. I think that there are many good examples in Africa, in India, a little less in America, because we are very close to USA, so we basically do what they say. And but in Africa and Asia, we can see very good examples of entrepreneurs and companies that are embracing the open source technology to build up their businesses. So I think there will be a change in the future. Maybe nowadays it's more difficult, but hopefully it will be easier in a few years.
Thank you. Anne, do you have a follow-up? Are you okay? Are you satisfied?
I'm satisfied regarding what's about open source sources. I understood, and maybe I have to get down my big wall in front of me to be a little bit more encouraged to use them, and don't be afraid of it. That's maybe my personal step I have to take.
Okay, great. I just got terrified that he says that I don't own my iPad. I've just licensed to use it, yet I paid so much money, for it. It's crazy. But let's go to Elfrida. Elfrida has a question or a contribution. Please proceed.
Okay, hi everyone. Thank you very much for the insightful presentation, Daniel. I want to just talk about some of the good things that has happened from student learning at home, because I've had the opportunity to speak to some parents and then also to observe how some kids have studied at home. And I think that one, there's actually very great appreciation for the work that teachers do, the contribution of teachers to the educational sector, because at first parents just every morning, they bundle their kids, take them to school, go pick them up after school, and they are not really involved in what is done in schools. But now parents have really great appreciation for the work of teachers. And they have an understanding, you know, when teachers are always, and the schools are asking for parents to buy books or to pay more for private schooling and more for other materials, they really don't appreciate what's being done. But now parents really appreciate it. And I've also, one thing I've observed is, in terms of children, is that education has become more practical, you know, and the school is a very controlled environment with many children being taught by one teacher or two teachers in one core subject. But now there's a kind of one-on-one interaction. So the children are more free, and the relationship between parents and guardians is quite relaxed one. So you would be amazed at some of the questions that the children ask. And it has become science is no longer far away, because the parents have to try and find innovative ways to kind of explain the difficult concepts for the children to understand. And it's become more practical for the children. They are asking more questions that if it was in school, they wouldn't have even asked. So these are some of the things that has really helped. And also the suggestion that Daniel gave about using other means, it's actually being done in Ghana. The TV is being used. So several stations, they have recorded sessions for maths and science and social studies and other things, where they play it during the day for different levels. And then people in remote areas can watch, those who do not have internet. So I think that this COVID period and the challenge with education has really brought back the role of society in educating the younger generation, because and now we leave it all to the school, but parents have now taken a more individual interest in it. And subjects like art, you know, at first you have the whole day with your kid, you have to find something to occupy them. So you have to think of innovative ways. Now you see that many parents are taking art seriously. They are taking, children are getting reading time. At first, they'll spend all the time watching television. Now children are getting more reading time. Read a book, summarize, explain to me at the end of the day, so I can also do my work. So the children are getting other ways of learning, and the parents are becoming more aware of more innovative ways, and children are actually learning more skills, rather than even more than how to handle social media. So these are some of the positives. And in planning an alternative kind of educational system for emergency and all that, these things can be taken into consideration. How to integrate learning at home, making it more interesting, more fun, and how to get the parents on board. Yes, the parents are busy and all that, but still, if you get parents on board, you know, seeing your child actually draw, seeing your child take an interest in a certain subject, it helps you to know the kind of direction, the interest. Sometimes it's difficult reaching out to the kids because they're always at school, but seeing them actually do what they do, it helps you to know the direction, and it actually helps you to guide them as to the path or the pathway that they should take in the future. So these are some of the pros of learning at home or learning remotely. That's my submission. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alfreda. Wonderful. Yeah, but let me ask you one follow-up question on: does this experience cut across the whole of Ghana? Did you also find challenges in terms of, kids who could not afford the gadgets that we are talking about? They were just there, going on with life normally. And also the next question is have you opened schools in Ghana, or is we are still on lockdown?
Okay, so people, especially people in the remote areas, they haven't been able to afford technology. If your parent does not have a smartphone, it's actually very difficult for you to join Zoom meetings, to watch online sessions and all that. So the only way that you can is to watch television. And if you don't have electricity, then you are absolutely left out. So that has been the challenge for people, especially in areas where they do not have access to electricity or they do not own television. So actually, yes, the poor and the vulnerable are actually left out. That is where the challenge is. But for the children in the cities, it has been great for them because there are so many avenues, so many avenues. They are watching on TV. Some schools, we are not on lockdown. Activities have resumed to almost normal. Universities are open for just half of the school for just 2 years. So we have final year students, and then we have second year students going to school. For high school, we also have the third year students have graduated. So we have the second year students going in, and then a part of first year will go at the beginning of next year. For junior high school, we have some of them also going, not everybody, but for the people who are almost completing, they've also started going. But what I've realized is that some schools are offering, for some parents, there is absolutely no way they can keep their children at home because they have to go to work. So some schools offer a kind of, let's say, babysitting. So you leave your child there for the day and pay for it. The schools are offering those services. Some schools are offering it at a private cost. So you have to pay, but then they are being taught as if they are in school, but it's fewer kids. So when you can't stay at home with your child, those options are also available. So you can see that some children have gone to different schools to get those services. But hopefully by February, all schools will resume normal activities. So that's the situation in Ghana.
Yeah, thank you so much. We hope for the best. I want to bring in Gita. I know that she can hear us.
Or maybe I can come in. Sorry, I'm not able to raise my hand or other things like that.
Nathan,
because
welcome.
There's no.
Welcome.
Yes. I want to talk about what Dr. Daniel was talking about. I want to thank him for the good presentation and summarizing everything. When it comes to open source software, like Anna Weber was talking about in Germany, where they use they don't depend on open source, right? Because maybe the country is more developed. But when you look at developing countries, they mostly rely on open source because it is cheaper. For those software that are not open, they are very expensive to maintain in some organizations, especially line government ministries. So most of the softwares that we use most in our country mostly are open software. Then the other challenge that can be there on open software is that they are prone to viruses and other cyber activities. So in most developing countries, they refrain from open software because of those same cyber activities that are in there. Then when it comes to the learning environment, are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Yeah. Proceed. Yes.
Okay. When it comes to the learning environment, like here in Zambia, when the coronavirus began, there was a closure of schools. So there are problems in terms on how to distribute the learning materials and how to conduct it.
Nathan? Hello? Yeah, I think Nathan has disappeared. some time. But I like the point that is bringing through regarding the open software, the open software, the sources, and so on and so forth, and the challenge that comes with cybercrime. You know, I don't know what Daniel you want to say about this, because these are challenges that we're also getting here in Kenya, whereby you can purchase a phone. It has those free softwares, applications, and once you, because in Kenya we use a lot of money transfer, mobile money transfer. Once you start using mobile money transfer, your money, somebody cleans you out. Because the application that was loaded into the phone had some malware, came with some malware that was activated once the phone became active. Yeah. I mean, it's a big challenge, and also the issue of when children are learning with these gadgets, the question of protecting them from interference, pornography, watching the wrong stuff, and so forth. I mean, how do you deal with all this? How do you govern all these challenges that we have?
Yeah, well, so I would say first that cybercrime is not an issue directly related to whether the software it's open source or not, or closed. Actually, if you look at it from a broader perspective, malware is usually hidden in non-open software, because if malware was hidden in any open source technology, it could be easily and quick. It is, because sometimes there are attacks on open source software, and it's usually very quickly discovered, and the malware is discarded, which is not possible when you are using closed source technologies. For instance, I can't remember the particular program, but actually Zoom itself had several vulnerabilities for decades that nobody even knew about it until, well, not decades because it's not so old, but for many years, until it became widely used. And then people started noticing that there were vulnerabilities that allowed, for instance, that someone else could take control of a computer which had Zoom installed. But nobody noticed because there was no, it was only the company owning the source that could audit their own product, no one else. And if we don't know if they actually knew about the problem. Maybe they knew and they didn't want to do anything about it because it was going to make them spend more resources, and they decided that it was a small risk. But on the other hand, with open source software, you can actually, anyone can, with the skills, of course, can audit and review if there is something wrong in the code. In the case of software, and in the case of hardware, you can also check if something is wrong, if something is not if something is going to fail. You may be familiar with this also concept that things are designed to fail in a particular period of time. So if you actually could see the design, you could tell which part to change if you have the skills, if you know about mechanical parts, or if you know about some things. But the idea is that when with open source technologies, it's easier to find the problems and to fix them, because anyone can fix them. You don't need to wait for the owner to fix the problem. So it's usually faster to fix problems. It's usually easier to find them also. And because if it is a widespread use technology, then you have the whole world looking at it. So that's something that no company can afford. There's no single company that can afford that the whole world or the whole amount use base is checking and reviewing their software. So that's one part of your question. You complemented it with another problem, which is not directly cybercrime, but maybe unwanted uses by by people, especially children that have difficulties in telling which things are right or wrong, and they don't have enough tools to discriminate about information, news, etc. It's a very broad thing. So in open source technologies, there are specific developments for that also that I am aware. I haven't checked them, I haven't used them, but I know that there are. And the interesting thing is that you can, if for those who again, for those who have the skills and experience, they can develop it even further. So to include checks on what's the technology doing. Of course, later, if the children itself develop its own skills and can modify the software to break the safeties, well, that means that kids it's very smart.
That's right.
And you should have encouraged him or her to develop further. But yeah, so the thing is that there are some issues that cannot be solved by the technology itself. So the best thing is to do in this particular case with children is that the parents or whoever is responsible for the children should know what the children is doing. There's of course you can put additional technological barriers to keep the children safe, but eventually the responsibility remains on the adults that are responsible for the children, I guess.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the danger is that most of our parents are digitally illiterate. So, I mean, that's another challenge altogether. I don't know whether anyone, because we have exhausted our time. Anyone with a burning issue that they want to share?
Annie is raising her hand.
Yeah,
Yes.
sorry, because we are turning around the open source, and it was even not my intention that to continue discussing that, but that is now properly discussed, so I come back to that again.
No worries.
The question is because the session was called The Future of Education. And my question is now, okay, what does that mean? If we agree, okay, that we are users of open sources, open source software, how can we manage as people who are in universities or teachers at high schools or even at primary schools, how can they prepare their clients, students or pupils to make use of them, and how can they get access? So I think that is something which we have to respond to and find our ways how we make students and students in school bringing them at that level that they can have access and they can make the right choice for a certain type of open source software. So that is my question. Okay, how?
Thank you.
How?
Yes.
Now, that is something, the way in between the one who has developed it and to the final user. Not those who have a little bit of knowledge, but those who are still on their way to get this knowledge.
Yes. Thank you, Anne. I mean, that's a serious and an important question, because then it's basically about digital skills and how to enhance and teach on digital skills, because then you have teachers who don't know how to use computers, yet they are teaching learners out there. So how do you first enhance the skills of the teacher so that the teacher can now transfer the same to the child that they are teaching? And the same thing to universities. And of course, universities is another level, another advanced level altogether. I think Daniel will respond to that, but before he does, I will invite him to respond to that towards the conclusion, but I also want to hear whether there's anyone who wants to make a contribution, because we also would have wanted to get a diversity. of views. I don't know whether I've seen people like Gita, Diana. Did Diana really get to hear what we are saying? Gita, yes.
Yes, I can. Yes, I can hear everything, and I'm actually it's very interesting discussion. Well, basically on this topic, I'm not sure if I can comment basically, but if I want to put it in brackets, well, I have like the experience that I have faced, like, or I heard actually what has happened so far, especially with school children in Iran. And if I want to connect it to accessibility, so to say, because I understand this issue of software and everything, but in most of the places I know and I have heard of is like so many children, they don't even have access to the devices, or they don't have access to the internet, for example. That's why this experience of Ghana that mentioned, and also in Daniel's presentation, it was mentioned about using media like TV and radio, which is quite should be used, but so far I didn't hear anything about that. And yeah, I mean, this is like a little bit away from what Annie was discussing about the open source and stuff, but this is my experience so far about this accessibility of the internet itself and of the devices itself. I know families, for example, there is one mobile phone only for 3 children in one household to use to connect, you know, for education. So yeah, I mean, this is what I have, you know.
Thank you
so far.
That's a very important point. It reminds me of Kenya. For the private school parents, you have 3 children at home, and they're in different classes, and the lessons are taking place at the same time. So every child must have a gadget. And I mean, how do you go about it? It's a lot in terms of economic impact. I mean, how do you afford all that? It's been crazy. So I don't know. Thank you so much, Gita, for that. I don't know whether Diana wants to say something so that we can, anyone want to hear her voice also. We don't leave her out.
She wrote in the chat room.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't check that. Yeah, so she said, sorry, there's a lot of noise around here. I see lines through here. Actually, I have a question I have to, I hope I can still be answered. In Colombia, the main discussion we are going through right now has actually to do with the impact of imparting lessons in schools, or virtually is having or will have. So the impact of imparting lessons in schools virtually.
Yeah, well, I guess.
Well, yeah, please.
Yeah, sorry, I just tried to move a little bit, so maybe there's not so much noise. What I mean is that right now, I think the main problem here, or the main source of discussion, is that there is some fear about what the effect of having just virtual classes, for example, is having on children and their development, versus, you know, like children actually going to schools and stuff. So that's the main question I want to ask you, and also that is related to our discipline, which is planning, that this is also having a impact on the economy, right? Because there are so many activities around universities, in the nearby schools, let's say like restaurants, well, many facilities that are actually facing this impact. So I don't know if maybe you can also add something on this regard, because it's actually the main issue for us right now that we are actually talking about.
Thank you. Finally, we've heard your voice.
Sorry.
Looking forward to that. Like
they are doing something nearby, and there's a lot of noise. But I actually was lucky.
Okay, great. I think Daniel, you can respond to that and also combine that with the one on digital literacy gap that Anne was raising, especially for learners. And I think from there we are going to make the conclusion.
Yeah.
So just
well,
in a minute.
It's how do you say? Well, I forgot the word. So yeah, I think it's a very. I will start with the last comment with Diana's comment. So I think it's a discussion that is being held everywhere, and it has to do with what I mentioned in the presentation with respect to try to do everything that we were doing normally. I think that's the main problem that we are having now, because we don't realize we have to do things differently. We are not in a normal state. We have to change. So yes, there are many economic activities that that are not working properly, or they are not getting clients or revenues, and of course around the educational centers, and not only there. We here, Valdivia is a small town. We have seen and most they have a strong industry based on tourism, and of course that is completely shattered to pieces now. So I am lucky enough, I would say, that I haven't experienced something as terrible as war in my life experience. But I would like to take that as an example. So you cannot expect, I know it's an extreme example, but you cannot expect that economy will work the same in an emergency situation. It has to be changed. So I think that in some cases it has been the authorities, but also the society itself has not grasped this. And so we have to transform, at least temporarily, all the capabilities we have. So we have a lot of, so what can we do with the industry that is idle right now? So food industry or tourism industry. So here there was a small example. So they were renting the hotels and other kind of lodging to be used as residence for people who got the virus but do not require intensive medical care. So yeah, okay, so that's fine. But there are other things. So okay, so what happens with the students that, as I mentioned, received food in the university or at the school? So the people who provided the food for them or prepared the food for them, why are they not still doing the same if they can? They need help to articulate that. So they will need support from authorities, from the society, the community itself. So, but I think we can find some ways to make use of all this capacity that is not being used right now, because it will not work in this pandemic situation. So the normal I go to the store thing, it's not working. So there are constraints. Cities which are in lockdown and all this stuff. So I think that because we didn't stop to think how to face the pandemic, we have missed the opportunity to discuss about this. And as I said, we are reactive. So we see that we have this problem. So what's the first solution? So let's try to reopen the schools as fast as possible. But maybe there was another solution in between, and we didn't see it, or we didn't have the time to think about it. So and that's the effect on economy. The effects on learning, at least my experience during the first semester of this year, is that the virtual education was less effective than the normal physical standard procedure classes. Why? Mostly because we were not used at using the remote tools. So, but as I mentioned, it's not possible to provide the whole learning experience to virtuality. So then, and now we have two things to do. So we either find some way to either provide it virtually. Is it possible or not? I don't have the answer for that. Or maybe in the future we will have a different society that will not require those learning outcomes that can only be supplied by presential or physical contact. So maybe in the future we will have a society that do not relate to each other physically. I hope not, but there are good books about that. Isaac Asimov has a great insight in this kind of future. So yeah, so the students now learn how to interact with each other without being physically in touch. So maybe they will need less of that in the future. I don't think that in the next generations the change will be so big. I think we will still need and require as a society this physical contact. But yeah, I think if we want to keep the curriculums as they are now, virtual tools are not enough. They are good. I think between, I don't know, this is just a very broad range, but from 50 to 80 to 90% of things maybe can be taught virtually, but depending on subjects and topics and stuff, but not everything. For instance, there's something that a particular issue that we have with our students in the university is the practical laboratories. So right now they can acquire theoretical content, they can simulate things, they can even do some experiments at home, but they cannot do every experiment at home. They require bigger, better, safer facilities. So what will happen when this person goes live to do an actual work and it needs the practical experience? That cannot be supplied virtually. And the safe environment to do that is the school, the university. And if he postponed the learning to when he's actually doing this for to supply a service to the community, it might even be dangerous, because whatever this person is doing, be it a healthcare professional, someone working in agriculture or in electricity or building, if he's learning, and for learning you need to make mistakes. If you start making mistakes at that stage, the effect it can be devastating for the whole society. So that is something that I don't think can be replaced easily so we cannot replace everything with virtuality. And of course, is also the issue that Gita mentioned, that not everyone has access to the technology delivery methods that we have nowadays. That can be solved with more resources or using other technologies. But right now, it is not just possible. At least for this year and the next, we will not have everyone in the world with access to internet. And I haven't replied to Anna's question yet.
You can take a minute on that. I mean, yeah, it's basically, yeah.
Yeah, it's the most difficult, I guess. So I right now I think because the problem you have, many of you have already established it. So the problem is the digital gap. I mean, not everyone has the skills. I thought 20 years ago, I thought that today, when students were finishing their secondary education, they would have a complete set of computing skills, because they have everything they need to develop that, but they don't. Why it's not happening, I'm not really sure. I'm not very involved in that level of education, but something it's being really slow in that sense. So we haven't developed, as Leo said, enough digital skills for that. So in the meantime, what can we do? I think the approach that usually or that the open source movement has used so far is similar to other disciplines, is to try to convince influential people to communicate this, and also to have good quality support, either people or companies. Just as a simple example, that it is possible, because I have just learned about it. So there are in Chile, there are some multinational retail companies operating, and I have a friend doing a project, a technology development project for one of those, and I am advising him in his project. And the company, so all of his technology is being developed over open source technology. And interestingly, this multinational retail company also had their systems based on open source software. Only they had chosen a different one because it had commercial support. So there are companies providing commercial support, like Red Hat, like Canonical. There are a few companies that that can be used by other institutions to get support. But there's, because of the openness of the free and the freedom of free and open source movement, anyone can provide this support. So it would be good to encourage people at local level, those people who have the skills to learn more about this, and they can learn because there are no secrets. You can get the information, you can download it, you can ask for someone to print it and mail it to you if it is needed. I work a lot with software and with technology, but most of I know regarding software was self-learned. I had to study it myself. Of course, I was interested in that, so I had no problems. But I learned a lot of open source because the documentation was there, and it was very good quality documentation. It was very thorough. It was very deep in contents, in knowledge. It was very didactic also. And because it was free, you could experiment with it. Of course, when it's easier when you are young and you have more time. It's difficult when you are not. But that would be a good point. So take teenagers, take young adults, and motivate them to explore this. And maybe the way now to do that is probably through competitions or challenges. Just this weekend, in the IEEE, the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers, there was the IEEE Extreme competition. It is a competition where students all over the world try to solve video games by writing code that plays the video games. So, of course, it doesn't have any practical use, but it will develop amazing skills on these young people. And if they use so if we add to that, or we do something similar, but with open source technologies, then we could have trained people that could support every community. I'm sure that in every community you can find people with the skills, but these people have not yet found or learned about the open source movement. So if you put them together, then I'm sure that it will ease the connection that Anne was mentioning. And Mary Grace wants to say something.
I think we're out of time.
Just a quick one. Hey, hello everybody. Nice to see everyone.
Yes,
well, Daniel showed some of the slides about lack of resources and so on. And I just remembered my sister showing me some photos of Philippines, of how or also the public the news that's coming in, because there's this bridge also of the government revising the modules before going to the parents that will teach the children. We saw some in the news that they photocopy a colored page and they want to identify the colors of those in the lesson. So how can a student relate to the colors if it was photocopied in black and white when the original is in color? So these are those challenges of having maybe overseeing these details. Maybe it has to be strengthened more. This service reviewing and delivery, is it the word, maybe I don't know if the right word, delivery to the parent when doing these modules. Yeah, so this has been, if you look at the websites, it will come up these kinds of errors or limitations. And the other thing is about open source. Well, in terms of in planning, at least in the area where I'm working, I will be teaching GIS to students. Gita was one of my students before, and now I'm going to teach GIS remotely, virtually. So before I could use the blackboards and so on. So I have to find a software. Well, we already have identified it, and we are going to use open source in giving this. So instead of ArcGIS desktop that we are normally using, we are going to use QGIS because this is open and open source and it's free. So because I have heard other professors in other universities that are migrating or at least trying to learn now QGIS or GVC or other open source to teach, because in normal situation, they have these laboratories with many computers, and you have one license or several licenses just for those computers. So now that everybody's working at home, but they have this course, they cannot use it because they cannot bring the license to their home. So what the professors are now adapting and trying to look at other possibilities, and these are it's just one example that they are doing. We are exploring open source because of the limitation, or it's too expensive for us that individually can buy it. So only just a comment, like, thank you.
Thank you. I mean, that was a wonderful injection. Those are the experience that we've been looking for. And because when they taught me computers at the time, it was basically theory. And then after a month or two, they took us to the computer lab. Now show us how the computer functions. They took us back to theory. And when the exam came, the lecturer expected us to draw, how, the various desktop publishing aspects, how they look like, features, and so on and so forth during the examination. So it was, we appreciate the contribution. It's really practical and wonderful. I don't know whether, Daniel, you can say your final words, your parting shot, either as a response or not, so that we can come to an end of this beautiful engagement.
Yeah, it will not be a general comment. It will be a thought that came to me when I heard Freda speaking earlier, and she mentioned about this experience of one-to-one teaching, at least the virtual contact between students and teachers virtually, and uh, uh, that makes me think that we need more teachers because in order to provide effective learning in a remote environment, we will definitely need more teachers to handle the students and to ease the load on the parents. And also I like I like very much. I didn't mention it, but Freda also mentioned that. But I also like this effect that we are like living more in this at the family level. So we are having a very close relation. But the problem with that is that it may not be optimal, as you mentioned. So we will need to replicate many things that when you can gather several kids together, it's more efficient. I was remembering this. How it probably was in old communities or old civilizations where before schools. So probably someone in the community would take care of the kids, and then the other members of the community will go and do other stuff for the community, and maybe they will rotate the responsibilities. But yeah, it cannot be the extreme of being completely isolated, because that's inefficient. But we also should not lose this sense of community. I guess that's my what I wanted to say.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Daniel. You are a beautiful mind. I mean, I would have wanted to engage with you more on artificial intelligence because I've seen that it's part of your specialty, but I think we are out of time, and
Yes,
I think we are going to be, thank you, next time. We're going to be left with your words, accepting the crisis and embracing the challenge, and also that I think a very important point that you say that school is the place where we live the education, not just places to learn content. I think that was a very important point, and we are going to be left with that. And we are thankful for the participants for making this engaging and as lively as you have done, and the various experiences that you've shared. We appreciate, and we appreciate the organizers for giving us this platform, and we wish them well and success in the conference. Thank you so much. It's a good night from Kenya. Herzlichen Dank. We are happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye.
It was really